Welcome back to Words of Paradise. I'm your host, Leon Idle, and we're going to talk about review bombing today. Now, I promise, this isn't going to turn into Resident Evil 4, the channel. I know I've done a few videos on that as of late, and that's not my intention, but the review bombing news took me by surprise, and it made me think about a larger issue at play. And when I say issue, I'm not going to say what you think I'm going to say, just stick around. Look, Captain Marvel, back in 2019, was review bombed. It's a fact, it did happen. Now, does the fact that it was review bombed change the overall quality of the movie? No, not at all. I mean, it was still a bad movie. The fact that people were calling it bad before it came out, forcing the internet and, places like Rotten Tomatoes to change how they do the rating system, it's a stupid consequence of people making bold assumptions before the movie comes out, but then turning out to be correct. Point is, review bombing has changed the landscape of how reviews are done on the internet, whether it be typed out reviews or here on YouTube. But also, review bombing has lost all meaning nowadays, and I'm about to show you a few examples of how review bombing has lost all meaning, starting with this article about Resident Evil 4. This is bananas. Let's take a look. Resident Evil 4 Remake is being review bombed. Despite receiving near universal praise from critics, Capcom's Resident Evil 4 is currently being review bombed by gamers unhappy with the remake. Now let's see. Universal praise from critics, review bombed by gamers. As if people who are playing the game, going out, buying the product, the ones spending their hard-earned $60, $70 on this, at the end of the day, they are the real critics. People like you and me, we the real critics. Like, yeah, I know I like to hop on here and do movie reviews and do video game reviews in between my reporting on the nerdy news. But at the end of the day, reviewer? I always wanted to be a film reviewer growing up. That was my dream job. I love movies. Movies are my passion. As much as I enjoy video games, as much as I love anime, my passion is movies. My dream job is to be a film reviewer. By the same token, most reviewers are morons. They're just pretentious, insipid slags. And I get it. It's gotten near universal praise from critics. Well, are the critics going out and paying $70 for this game? Or is Capcom just sending them a nice, free copy for them to play so they can write their article with a bunch of glowing reviews to get this thing sold? Because how many people buy games purely based on reviews? I know a lot of individuals do. I myself, I go about 50-50 on it. Sometimes I buy a game regardless. Like, if this game got crappy reviews, I would buy it regardless, because Resident Evil is my favorite franchise of all time. So even if it got bad reviews, I would have purchased it just to own it. That being said, sometimes if a game gets awful reviews, I don't buy it. It depends on my interest level in the game, review notwithstanding. But who people should listen to are the gamers unhappy with the remake. The people that did not get their palms greased with a free $70 copy and instead had to actually buy the game and spend time experiencing it after looking forward to it for months upon months, who also aren't doing it for a job. Gamers don't game for a job 9 times out of 10. This is what they do on their downtime. It's what they do to relax. It's what they do when they get home from the outside world after working a 10-hour shift at a job they hate, probably making bacon for some fat slob who stepped in at the Waffle House in their truck, their 18-wheeler, calling them a bunch of mean names and smoking cigarettes because, Waffle House is one of the few places you can still smoke inside, I'm sure, at least in some states. And then they get home, they're all greasy and sweaty, and they say, I just want to unwind, and they pop on Resident Evil 4 Remake. And if they're unhappy with it after they worked several of those 10-hour shifts to be able to afford this game after paying all their other bills, yeah, I'd say they got a right to leave a negative review if this experience leaves a bad taste in their mouth. That's not review bombing. Even as many reviewers and players continue to sing its praises, Capcom's remake of the survival horror classic Resident Evil is now being review bombed by some gamers dissatisfied with the title. If they are dissatisfied with it, it's not a review bomb. Here's where we need to get into what the definition of a review bomb is. Review bomb: to manipulate an online rating system with a semi-organized campaign of unfavorable user reviews, often as a general statement of disapproval for a creator, a publisher, or other business, rather than a genuine opinion about a specific product or experience. Now, this has happened. Review bombing has happened. No one's going to pretend it doesn't. Does it happen near as often or near as bad as some of the major internet crybabies on Twitter like to claim it happens? No, it doesn't happen that often or that much or that bad, but it does in fact happen. I already said, Captain Marvel, the review bombing for that totally happened. But let's really take a look at this definition. To manipulate an online rating system with semi-organized campaign of unfavorable user reviews. People ain't getting together on forums for Resident Evil 4 and talking about how they're going to give it mid reviews. Because that's what the reviews are. The reviews aren't bad. They're not 0s and 1s and 2s. The total reviews are mid. It's coming out with like 5s to 7s. That's not review bombing. That's just people being generally, not necessarily dissatisfied, but not satisfied either. Very down the middle with their reviews. I mean, I'm going to give my review here in a few days once I've got all, recorded, scripted, edited. Probably be out next week. And while I'm not going to tell you guys the review that I'm going to give it, I'm not going to tell you guys the number, I will say I'm not just some critic that's going to give it a perfect 10 out of 10 because my palms are greased with a free copy. I'm going to give an honest assessment of the game and my thoughts and my feelings about it as a whole, because I'm on my 3rd playthrough of it. I mean, that says something if I'm at least on a 3rd playthrough. I'm using that 3rd playthrough to get video, to capture footage for my recording. I wanted my 1st playthrough to be, just for me. And the 2nd playthrough, I don't really know why I didn't record things, but point is, there's no semi-organized campaign of unfavorable user reviews targeting Resident Evil 4. It's not getting review bombed. Sometimes when things just don't get overwhelmingly positive reviews, it's because the average folk aren't overwhelmingly positive about it. There's no general statement of disapproval for the creator or publisher or other business. In this instance, there's no disapproval for Capcom or any of the individuals behind the scenes that were making Resident Evil 4. Everyone loved Resident Evil 2. Everyone hated Resident Evil 3. And it seems like from the reviews, everyone's pretty mid and torn on Resident Evil 4. That's kind of par for the course for Resident Evil. This game series has always had a bit of an identity crisis, and people have been very divided on the series pretty much since Resident Evil 4. Let's go back to this article. While fans of the franchise have been clamoring for a Resident Evil 4 remake for years, no, we haven't. We've been clamoring for a remake of Code Veronica, but this is the game. This is Game Rant. It's another shill website that clearly doesn't know what actual gamers want. This is just stuff they write to make headlines, to make clickbait, to make a quick buck. Because no, fans have not been clamoring for a Resident Evil 4 remake for years. You might find a handful, but the vast majority of us not really. A wide range of perceived issues with the long-awaited release have seemingly left some players fuming. A remake of the acclaimed 2005 GameCube original, Capcom's Resident Evil 4 is the latest entry in the long-running franchise to be revamped for modern hardware. While many gamers have expected the fan-favorite title to be next in line for the upgrade following the success of the remake of Resident Evil 2 and 3, so why aren't you saying the 3 was review bombed? Out of curiosity, Resident Evil 3, the remake, is loathed among actual Resident Evil fans. In fact, let's take a look at some review scores right now. Here we are. Resident Evil 3 user score 6.6, Metascore 7.9. So I mean, why isn't this a review bomb if it didn't exactly get a perfect score? Because this game is trash. This is one of the worst, not even remakes, just one of the worst Resident Evil games in history, in the franchise history. I will take Resident Evil 6 over Resident Evil 3 Remake. Like, that should be saying something to you people if you know anything about the franchise. But we're not calling this review bombed, so what is it about 4 that makes it different? Is it because 4 is a remake of a classically beloved game, so you know you'll get more traction when you make your title talking about how it's being review bombed, because more people are going to have eyes on it because 4 is so more immensely popular than 3? Is that what it is? So you're manipulating your audience, you're manipulating your reviews. That is so much worse than review bombing, if review bombing even happened, which in this case it didn't. The Resident Evil 4 remake wasn't officially announced until June 2022. Capcom's reimagining of the survival horror classic has received near universal praise from critics, and creative gamers have already designed a number of often hilarious mods for Resident Evil 4's PC release. Although the PS5, PC, and Xbox Series X releases of Resident Evil 4 Remake will have a Metascore over 90 as of the time of this writing, the user score for each release tells a decidedly different story. All 3 versions of the game currently have a low user score on Metacritic, with PS5 slightly edging out the user scores for the other 2 releases. While there's been some criticism of Resident Evil 4's performance problems on PS4, complaints from displeased players run the gamut from gameplay changes to poor controls. Now, it says they've got poor scores, right? That's what that article said, poor scores. 7.1 is not poor. 7.1 is average. User score, 5.5. Again, average. If you've got a scale of 1 to 10, 5 is literally directly in the middle. That would mean average. And this is a 5.5, slightly more. So 7.1, slightly above average, but not that great. It's a little above average. Average, average. Xbox is average, was PC is average, and PlayStation 5 is still average, but on the very high end. People aren't even bombing this game. If people were bombing this game, we would see zeros and ones and twos. The user score, I mean, 5.5 out of 700 ratings, out of 1,200 ratings, out of, again, close to 700 ratings. Like, this is not review bombing. Does review bombing have meaning anymore? Because if you go to Google and you type in The Last of Us review bombed, 17 hours ago, The Last of Us PC port is being review bombed. 1 month ago, what does it mean that Last of Us Episode 3 has been review bombed? Well, let me tell you, I didn't watch The Last of Us. I didn't care about The Last of Us TV show. I will say, I saw the narrative about The Last of Us Episode 3 being review bombed, and from what I gathered, it was not review bombed at all. It was a very divisive episode. There's a difference between something being review bombed, which is people going in and, hate clicking it, hate reviewing it because of they were so anti the gay agenda in episode 3. And there's a difference between that and people just not liking it, because from what I've heard, the episode is very well shot. It's very well done. The story is very well put out and articulated, but it's effectively a filler episode. No one wants to sit through a filler episode on the 3rd episode of their brand shiny new TV show. So a lot of people were like, yeah, it was a competently made episode, but it was boring. It dragged. It didn't add anything. It took quite a bit of liberties from the original source material. And so it got negative reviews from about half the audience for what seems like very valid reasons, and it got positive reviews from the other half for people that have good reasons as well. People that like the deviation from the source material, that like the expanded lore. I mean, this wasn't getting review bombed, and here's my thought process for how it wasn't getting review bombed. All the individuals that you call the fandom menace, the usual suspects, the critical drinker, things like that, straight up said this episode wasn't woke. Still said it wasn't good, but that it wasn't woke. And if there's people like that are saying, oh, it's not woke, those are the people you claim are trying to find woke in absolutely anything. So, Last of Us 3 wasn't review bombed. However, The Last of Us show was, in fact, review bombed. It was positively review bombed. It had over 200 positive reviews 2 hours before it actually debuted. That is positive review bombing, but no one cared about that. There were no news articles about that. But yes, The Last of Us, before it even came out, was sitting at a perfect 100% score on Rotten Tomatoes, or maybe it was Metacritic, I don't remember. With over 200 reviews 2 hours before the show came out. So review bombing absolutely happens, but not in the way they're wanting us to believe. Some of the most common complaints listed by users center around the changes made from the original release. Capcom restructured some parts of the game for the remake, adding new content in places while removing it in others. While this move was praised by many reviewers for helping to streamline the now nearly 20-year-old title, it's understandable that some fans of the original game would be disappointed to find their favorite story beat or gameplay mode cut from Resident Evil 4. Taking the opposite stance, other negative reviews come from gamers who felt that, beneath the gorgeous graphical overhaul, the Resident Evil 4 remake was just too similar to the original. Yeah, they were always going to run into that problem of, people complaining it was too similar, too different, whatever. Thanks to the special place it holds in the hearts of many fans, it's not surprising that gamers have mixed opinions about Capcom's Resident Evil 4 remake. While some players were excited to see changes made to bring the game into line with modern releases, it's clear that others thought it was just fine the way it was. And with the next Resident Evil remake potentially waiting in the wings, it's not long until another Capcom classic has to contend with one of the most dedicated and demanding fandoms in gaming. So yeah, there's that article. Again, I don't really want to talk too much about Resident Evil 4 so much as review bombing as a whole, because this game wasn't review bombed. I want proof of review bombing, because here they call it review bombing in this article, but I gave you guys the definition. Where's the proof that this was a semi-organized negative campaign against the game? If anything, it was a completely disorganized campaign of this game is mid, not even negative against it. That's the opposite of review bombings. That's just folks being honest. You really want to sit there and try and, I get you could try and convince people that episode 3 of The Last of Us was review bombed, because that has, some things in it that there's a war going on. There's a culture war going on over right now. Some people are super anti-gay stuff, and some people are super pro-gay stuff and want to see it in all their TV shows. Some don't want to see it in any TV shows. So when a TV show does have that, and you can absolutely try and divide people by making an article about how, oh yeah, episode 3 of The Last of Us, this divisive episode, it was review bombed, and you can stoke some flames and fires with an opinion like that. I can definitely see how people got away with making articles like that. But Resident Evil 4, a game that's getting mid reviews Like, okay, so the general populace of gamers are giving it between 5 and 7, but all the professional reviewers gave it nearly perfect 10. Review bombing, let's just jump to review bombing. You're either morons, or you're intentionally trying to stoke more division over things that don't even matter, like a remake of a horror game. This isn't even about race stuff, or trans stuff, or gay stuff, or whatever. We're talking about a remake of a video game here. And is it just a slow news day? What's going on? You run out of Russian, anti-Russian propaganda to talk about with Atomic Heart reviews, so you're moving to Resident Evil because it's Japanese. We can probably find something relating to World War II. I don't know. Like, what is the goal here? What's the end game? I don't see a reason for this article to exist when it's so blatantly false. Just by looking up the definition of review bombing, you can tell this game is not being review bombed. The word has lost all meaning. The word review bomb is like woke. The word review bomb is like Nazi. They've been used so much by people online for such minimal disagreements that they have lost all meaning. So really at this point, if everything's review bombed, nothing is. If everything is racist, nothing is. If everything is sexist, nothing is. How about we start reserving these words for instances when they actually are real? Because yeah, review bombing does happen. Again, the only example I can think off the top of my head, negative example, is Captain Marvel. It absolutely did happen with Captain Marvel. The movie was still bad anyway, but that doesn't necessarily make the review bombing of it okay. But that's neither here nor there. Review bombing happens. People being sexist happens. But you know what? Let's not call every little thing under the sun review bombed or sexist or racist, because at this point, you're just the boy who cried wolfing everything. But that's just my opinion. Let me know yours in the comments below, or you can let me know on Twitter, where you can find me at BoltTheWord. And please do subscribe. We're getting real close to that 700 subscriber mark, and I can't thank you guys enough. I've been so appreciative, and I would just love to keep taking that number higher, so thank you. I am a nerdy news channel. I do nerdy news every day, not just about Resident Evil 4 and video games, but also about movies, Magic the Gathering, anime, comics, you name it. It's all here in the nerdosphere, and this has been Words of Paradise.